Hi everyone, I'm Jack Trembling Raconteur. I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on London Match by Len Deighton, the conclusion to his first trilogy in the trilogy of trilogies involving Bernard Sampson, the working spy, the man who grew up in Berlin right at the start of the Cold War, and a man who has sort of seen it all, been there. Here we have an understated conclusion to a very effective trilogy that began with Berlin Game, continued with Mexico Set, which really ratcheted up the tension. And then in London Match, we have a whole series of subversions. There seems to be a second traitor. We unmasked one at the end of Berlin Game. In Mexico Set, Sampson had been successful in turning an opposition number, and now here he is. We're in the mid 1980s, 1985, the denouement of the Cold War, but they don't know it. And that's one of the things that makes the Game Set Match trilogy so effective, is that Deighton writing this did not know that the Cold War was going to be ending so soon after. He did not know that the Soviet Union was veering towards a collapse. And so there's a real sense of danger, not just for him personally, but for this way of life that he and his family lead. And that's something that the conversations, the interactions he has with Soviets he's turned, or with his wife, who has been revealed as a Soviet double agent in an earlier book, and now they're interacting with each other. That's something that they don't know, and he did not know at the time. And so that's one of the best features, I think, of the Game Set Match trilogy. But it's also the life, the way that Sampson, the way that Deighton writes Sampson is a man who's always between worlds. He's always between allegiances, public and private, personal and duty, east and west, his past and his present. He's constantly being torn apart. His family and his duty, and all of these things that rip him apart. His family and his friends. That's something that is just stunningly effective throughout this. The way that we have gotten to know these characters and those lived in world makes this a very effective conclusion. I thought I would just, as always, read the opening, I think, because Deighton does set the scene so well in each of these three books. "Cheer up, Werner, it will soon be Christmas," I said. I shook the bottle, dividing the last drips of whiskey between the two white plastic cups that were balanced on the car radio. I pushed the empty bottle under the seat. The smell of the whiskey was strong. I must have spilled some on the heater or on the warm leather that encased the radio. I thought Werner would decline it. He wasn't a drinker, and he'd had far too much already. But Berlin winter nights are cold, and Werner swallowed his whiskey in one gulp and coughed. Then he crushed the cup in his big muscular hands and sorted through the bent and broken pieces so that he could fit them all into the ashtray. Werner's wife, Zina, was obsessionally tidy, and this was her car. "People are still arriving," said Werner, as a black Mercedes limousine drew up. Its headlights made dazzling reflections in the glass and paintwork of the parked cars and glinted on the frosty surface of the road. The chauffeur hurried to open the door, and 8 or 9 people got out. The men wore dark cashmere coats over their evening suits, and the women a menagerie of furs. Here in Berlin-Wannsee, where furs and cashmere are everyday clothes, they are called the Haute Welle, and there are plenty of them. "What are you waiting for? Let's barge right in and arrest him now." Werner's words were just slightly slurred, and he grinned to acknowledge his condition. Although I'd known Werner since we were kids at school, I'd seldom seen him drunk or even tipsy as he was now. Tomorrow he'd have a hangover. Tomorrow he'd blame me, and so would his wife Zina. For that and other reasons, tomorrow, early, would be a good time to leave Berlin. And the way that their friendship, the relationships that they've had across the past 2 books, are touched on in those first few paragraphs and reveal the differences between Sampson and Werner. The way that we, as in Berlin Game, which sort of starts with this waiting game, we kick off with another waiting game to start London Match. There's this elliptical nature to the narrative. Characters who have turned traitor are brought out for another, interrogation, or for, an interaction, a dialogue with Sampson to reveal their allegiances. Characters who seem important are revealed to perhaps not be quite as important. Fiona's sister, Bernard Sampson's sister-in-law, Tessa, continues to develop as a fascinating character across London Match. The relationship, this burgeoning relationship with Gloria across this book, picking up from their more comical interactions in Mexico Set, that revealed Sampson to be bit of a lecture. Those work in strong detail. There's a humanity to the book that I think carries through. And the plotting is marvelous. There's also the consistent nature. One of the best features of Deighton's books is this idea that the real spies just hate the paperwork and the send up of the middle managers and the administrators that we all know from our jobs, whether it's in an office or a school or a hospital or in a spy agency. There's always the middle manager that nobody really gets along with. And so we have another dialogue around that. Well, I don't really want any of that in it, said Dickie. It's not a report, it's a diatribe. Whatever you want to call it, it's the truth, I said. We were sitting side by side in the drawing room of the Cryers' home. Dickie was wearing his I Love New York sweatshirt, jeans, and jogging shoes, with those special thick white socks that are said to lessen the shocks to the spine. We'd been watching the TV news to see if there was anything about the Hampstead shooting. There wasn't. The gas was hissing in the simulated coal fire, and that of the TV was displaying a rather unattractive foursome in punk outfits. For a moment, Dickie's attention was distracted by them. Look at those caterwauling imbeciles, he said. Are we working our guts out just to keep the West safe for that sort of garbage? Not entirely, I said. We're getting paid as well. He picked up the remote control and reduced the pop group to a pinpoint of light that disappeared with a soft plop. Then he took up my draft report again and pretended to read it afresh. But actually, he was just holding it in front of his face while he thought about what to say next. It's your version of the truth, he said pedantically. That's the only one I've got, I said. Try again. It's anyone's version of the truth, I said. Anyone who was there. When are you going to get it through your thick head that I don't want your uncorrupted testimony? I want something that can go to the old man and not get me into hot water. That type of dialogue reveals Bernard's, incorruptibility, even as we've seen the shades of corruption around him, the doubts that plague him, the question of who is this other traitor? Is it this reprehensible middle manager? Is it another reprehensible middle manager? Is it someone who had an affair with his wife? Is it, is it some other character around him who could be the traitor? And that's what he's hunting for. And the revelation, again, feels understated. It's not explosive. It's not overly dynamic, but it's incredibly effective. And that's what works so well across the Game Set Match trilogy. It is a slow burn in many ways, but there's a sense of dread and fear that covers the narrative. And because the characters seem so human and so real, that dread builds for real people, not just these cardboard characters who are being shuffled around like pawns. And so if you've never tried the Game Set Match trilogy, definitely recommend it. I'm looking forward this year to getting into the second part of the trilogy with Spy Hook. And then next year, maybe Spy Line, and eventually Spy Sinker once I acquire a copy. So I'm looking forward to that. In terms of Deighton's secret file books, I do think Funeral in Berlin is probably the closest to the Game Set Match vibe. Billion Dollar Brain is just overly extravagant. Horse Underwater and Ipcris File, I think, have a bit more action in them, which is a good thing. They're both very strong books. But Funeral in Berlin, I think, is the one where he sort of has returned to it in Berlin Game to rewrite aspects of that book very explicitly. Certainly John le Carré's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which I'll be reading here in May, rereading, I should say, for like the fourth time. Fantastic novel. Gets at that idea of like the spy hunting for the spy within his own organization very effectively. And Smiley's People, I think, was a key inspiration for where Deighton went with the Game Set Match trilogy in interesting and new avenues and sort of crafting his version of that. But I really did enjoy this. And then one other one, a book I read in January that deals with this idea of defection and misinformation and figuring things out would be Robert Littell's The Defection of A.J. Lewinter, his first book from the 1970s. And the way that Littell was finding his voice in this book was interesting. But let me know if you're a fan of the Game Set Match. I know several of you have commented over the past couple of years as I've been reading the other books, but I did really enjoy this. In retrospect, the full narrative, the full scope and sweep of it really does build in a compelling way. So as always, I hope you're doing well. Thank you.